Welcome to the Love Living Local 315 podcast. We are your hosts, Scott and Kelly Greats, and today we're thrilled to be joined by someone who truly embodies what it means to live, work, and give back to Central New York, Steve McMurray. Steve has dedicated over 2 decades to local journalism and leadership. He currently serves as the Vice President and General Manager of WKTV. But that's not where his journey started. He was initially a sportscaster at WUTR in 1995 before making his way up to news director and eventually spending 10 years as WKTV's news director before he stepped into the current leadership role that he holds. Steve's contributions go far beyond the newsroom, though. He's a proud graduate of Frankfort High School and Syracuse University's renowned Newhouse School of Communication. Steve has spent over 30 years serving his hometown through the Frankfort Fire Department, where he's been assistant chief and now is the company president. He's also a longtime member of the Frankfort Kiwanis Club, where he's held roles as president and is now the current secretary. And he gives so much time and support to the community that he calls home. Now, on top of all of this, Steve is a dedicated husband to his wife, Carrie, with whom he's celebrating 25 years of marriage this year, a proud father to their 2 children, Jack and Audrey. And his deep commitment to family and community is an inspiration. And today we're going to explore his journey and broadcasting his perspectives on leadership, the values that guide him. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this conversation with Steve McMurray as we discuss life, leadership, and the reasons that he loves living locally here in the 315. All right, this is a conversation I've been doing research on for the better part of 20 years now.
He prepped for a long time last
20
night.
years.
Yeah.
Why?
20 years.
I think he's nervous. I don't know.
I'm super nervous.
Don't be. There's not all that much going on here.
Stephen A. McMurray,
Yep.
head honcho, big kahuna, WKTV. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
We
Finally, I get something that my son got. So
we strategically made you last in
I
the
appreciate-
family.
that makes sense.
Kenny, your father-in-law, wasn't available, so
and Charlie can't sit still, so it's my turn.
That's right.
Okay.
Charlie's just not good on camera. All right, let's start with broad. So you went to Syracuse, Newhouse School, which is a big deal.
So when I was in 8th grade, I think 8th, 9th grade, along in there, obviously a big sports fan. Watching NFL football, NBC used to do their pregame show. When they start their pregame show, it was highlights of great games in the bet. Just like a 10-second snippet, right? And the announcer was going crazy, and it hit me at that point. I said, given my diminutive stature, I knew that pro sports was probably not in the cards, but this is a good way to be part of that. And I actually had a band teacher, his name was Jim Aher, and he said, Syracuse has a school for that. And I'd watched Syracuse football, Syracuse basketball, whatnot, but didn't know anything about the communications school. And he said, oh yeah, Bob Costas went there, Marv Albert, prior to his challenges, a lot of the big names went there. So I started just, looking into that. And that was, like I said, 8th grade or freshman year. And it was a good fit. It was about an hour away, so it was close enough. When I graduated from high school, my mother had just passed, so I sort of wanted to keep tabs on my father, but yet he couldn't swing over on the way home from work because it was an hour and change away, so it was perfect. Yeah. I loved it.
What was the draw to sport? So your father's music teacher, right? Not a sports guy.
Not at all.
But you're a huge sports family.
Yeah.
Just something different in DNA?
It's interesting because everybody asks me, how am I a Steelers fan? And the story I tell, and it's, legit, was back in the day when the Sears or JCPenney catalog came out. Right, that was a big day.
Oh, yeah.
No, right?
I remember the catalog. It's circling stuff that you want. And
And so, so I'm probably in kindergarten at this point, and the Sears catalog is loaded with Pittsburgh Steelers stuff. And I had watched football on TV. I didn't really know much about it, but it was actually my mother, also not a sports fan at all. Anecdote, those two would watch all the New Year's Day games because they would show the bands at halftime. Back in the day, right? But I think she figured out that, and I was the only little boy, right? I had 2 older sisters. Boys love sports. That was so. Here you go. And so I got more Steelers paraphernalia that Christmas to look like I knew what I was talking about. And then I just watched it all the time. And then, of course, growing up in the neighborhood, we played baseball and kickball and football and whatnot. Soccer wasn't really a thing until I was probably in second or third grade. But yeah, I just fell in love with it, and it helped that the Steelers won all the time, and
there was only 2 games on TV.
Yeah, 2 games,
and they were one of them.
Yeah, they were one of them. The Yankees were always on, right? And they were late 70s, same thing, very good until I became a fan, and then they tanked for another decade. But yeah, that's sort of how it started, honestly.
Nice.
Yeah.
So done with college in Syracuse, you decided to come back to Frankfort.
So I was actually still in college, and I had interned at WTR for 3 summers. A buddy of mine in the fire department, actually, Mark Harris, was the chief photographer at UTR, who actually got me the internship after my freshman year. And they had never done weekend news. It had been rumored that they would do it. It had been attempted. It just never got off the ground. And so February of my senior year, they're about 2 weeks away from launching weekend news at UTR. And the young man they had hired to do sports really just wanted a full-time job. He didn't really want to do anything with sports, and he took a gamble that it wouldn't get off the ground, and they just keep him as a news shooter. So all of a sudden, it's a week out now, and he goes to the boss and says, I can't do this. So now they're 5 days away from launching the weekends, and I had been interning there 3 summers, and so the news director called me. He's like, come on down. He goes, we need somebody to start Saturday. So come down for an interview, which was basically, just
we need you to do the news.
Here's the camera.
Yeah, just making sure, I didn't have any, felonies or anything like that. And I started that Saturday. So it's funny when everybody asks me about career advice and, talk about your first interview. Well, actually, I had the job before I had the interview. So
that's wild. I didn't know that.
But in all fairness, you 3 years interning, you put yourself in position. So when the opportunity came up,
exactly.
You were ready for it.
And listen, and I sacrificed a lot too. And I think that's, we can go off on that tangent in a while.
We will.
Okay. There were a lot of Friday nights and Saturday nights as a junior and senior in college that I wasn't out partying. I was shooting high school football,
right,
or high school basketball.
$5 an hour, I guess.
No, for being unpaid. Actually.
Oh, okay.
The internship was unpaid, right? And it wasn't until I started, then I was making the big bucks. I think that was $6 an hour. Luckily, still living at home, which I did until I got married. But that's another story. No, so that's how I started. I was in the right place, the right time, and there was, certainly, as you go through my career, being in the right place at the right time has been the hallmark multiple times over, quite honestly.
Yeah, so let's talk about that transition to WKTV. It's been how many years now?
So I left UTR in July of 2002, and I started August of 2002 at KTV. So I just about 22 years and change.
So 22 years. Station is celebrating 75 years in existence this week, December 1st. And you've been there for 22. My quick math, my Frankfurt math tells me you've been at KTV about a third of their existence.
Right.
Imagine that.
Yeah, no doubt. And, and it's fun. Well, and I grew up watching WKTV. I just, everybody did,
sure.
Right? My first night on the air at WTR, my father still watched KTV. He's like, oh, I forgot about that. He goes, I'm just so used to, and I can remember coming home at times, right? And before the 11, and KTV's 11 o'clock news was on with Bill, and I'm like, Dad, really?
Yeah. Well,
he goes, oh, yeah. So, but
no pressure, at least. You didn't have to worry about messing up in front of Dad. He wasn't watching.
Exactly. And look, the challenge, and I knew that when I was working at WTR, is that KTV had a 30-year head start, right? They signed on in 1949. WTR wasn't until 1970, and in an area that skews older demographics, for many folks that's all they knew, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what they grew up on, and so it really hit. And I was very proud of the stuff I did at UTR. Like, we won a lot of awards, news and sports. UTR has paved the way for a lot of very strong national talent. But as things there started to get to a point where I could see the writing on the wall, they were going to get out of the news business. So I had to make a jump. So I jumped over because I never would have. UTR, they gave me my opportunity. I met my wife there.
That's what I was going to ask you.
Which, again, the jury's still out. Is that a positive or a negative?
We'll get into that.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a long interview.
Yeah.
Buckle up.
But yeah, like I said, I mean, I owed a lot to them, but I also could tell that in less than a year, the whole department wasn't going to be there. So I had to do something different. So I had been approached by WKTV a couple times, and, back in the late 90s, KTV was a 4-letter word. But now you fast forward and, you're married and whatnot. And that's why I made the jump. And it was crazy. You walk in and there's a picture of Dick Clark and a lot of the folks and, Dick Lawler, Bill Worden, and all these guys, you've seen for Jerry Fiore that you've seen growing up. And and now to be in the position where it's you. It's my responsibility.
Well, and you're in many ways. I mean,
he's a celebrity.
You and Kristen, the face of it, really. Yeah. I mean, when people think of us growing up, you think Bill Worden. Mm-hmm. People growing up in this generation think you and Kristen. It had to be kind of surreal speaking at his services, right? I mean, was it the eulogy or wasn't there?
Well, so I spoke on behalf of the station, and there were other folks' eulogies. Yeah, I mean, look, Bill was as advertised. I mean, he was. It's a phrase that gets used too much, but Bill was just a good guy, right? He was a good human, and he had a presence about him when he walked in the room. Like, here's the big guy, right? That's what someone was called. Hey, big guy. Hey, here's the big guy. But there was no ego that, he was better than everybody. He was, it was an honor to work with him. It was interesting to manage him because, here's this guy that I watched forever. And I'm like, am I really going to tell this guy what to do? But he was great. He was, he was like, hey boss, here's what we're doing, boss. Oh, okay. Yeah. You know what I mean? And there, I don't remember what the circumstances were, but there was some, where I had to make a call to overrule him. And he said, what the best thing about you is? He goes, you have the ability to manage people without them realize they're being managed. I'm like, okay, yes, sir. Okay, please don't walk. But no, it was. But no, he was fantastic, and right down the line, right. Dick Lawler's another one, and Dick and I became close personal friends once I started. He welcomed me with open arms because there wasn't this rivalry or this cutthroat nature that you see in bigger markets where it just wasn't that way. And a lot of the photographers who are still working with me today, I would see them on stories. Jolene, I would see on stories, and so then all of a sudden you're working with them, and it was. And it's humbling every day. It really is. And I think what folks don't realize is what goes into it every day. Mm-hmm. And I think, luckily the knock against the media is more at a national level than a local level. But, there's still some residual that comes down to this level.
Public apology to Jolene Ferris, by the way. That I should have lumped her in with you and Kristen there as the face.
Well, she'll say, and Paula, and Jason. No, Jolene will tell you that she's much younger than all of us, which is not necessarily true.
So let's talk. Your role at WKTV is VP General Manager, right? Mm-hmm. But you still do the news.
So, yeah, just like every other business that is struggling to find employees and retain employees, it's been a way for me to now. Am I excited about getting up at 3:00 in the morning to do the morning show? I think excited is the wrong term, but it does give me a way to keep my feet wet in the day-to-day news operations.
And it's got to be fun. Like
it's,
you look like you're having fun when you're on air, and my mom will be like, "Oh, Stevie was on air today. I got to watch him this morning."
Her mother talks to the TV. I don't know if this is a thing.
A lot of folks do. No,
okay. Good morning, Stevie.
No, it is. I'll get texts. Right, call me Vivek. We'll watch the kids for years. Oh, you're right. Yeah,
that is awesome.
Once I'm in the building and yes, it is fun. It's I'm older than I used to be, so. And it helps, right, because we're short-staffed. If I can at least play that little role, even for that 2 or 3 hours, then I can keep 2 or other people on their regular shift, contributing the rest of the day. And at the same time, keeps me, like I said, keep my feet wet, keeps me involved in what's going on. I don't have a news director. Our news director left about 1.5 years ago, so we're sort of doing it by committee. I guess technically it's under my umbrella, but with the senior staff that, you mentioned Kristen and Jason and Jolene and Gary and all those, like they sort of, they've got so much experience. I don't necessarily know if you need a head honcho calling the shots.
Right.
It's more of just a coordinating and making sure we're doing what we need to do. And that makes my job certainly easier. But yeah, I was anchoring when I became general manager, and I just couldn't, and I was news director. I just couldn't do all at the same time, because at the time I was in the front of the building and newsrooms on the other side. And if I was in one place, I needed to be in the other, and vice versa. So that's why I stopped being the full-fledged news director and anchoring every day. I just thought it was, the optics weren't good. Is that if I'm going to be telling folks, viewers and web users and whatnot, what's going on, even they would know that I'm not fully invested in it every day. So for me to do that every day is almost, I don't know. It didn't resonate with me. It was a bad look. Plus, to try and juggle it all.
Right, the job role. But what's great about that is, I bet you it makes you a better manager that your employees know that you're still doing the job that you're asking them to do. At least, even as a teacher, for me, that was always hard to have administrators or your boss come in and give you suggestions when you're like, wow.
Well, even in the corporate world, a lot of people go into management
you've never
because
done
they can't do the job
that you're asking me to do, and you've done that. So I'm sure it makes you a much better manager than other people that have never sat in the anchor seat before.
Yeah, I try very hard to not ask someone to do something that I either haven't or didn't already do. Mm-hmm. The obvious, but I don't have a sales background, right? So that's the other side of this job, is the revenue side, keeping the lights on or whatnot. And I'm very fortunate to have a very solid sales staff with experience that I can, just sort of make suggestions because of that, right? I haven't been on cold calls to try and pitch somebody on something. So, Brittany Bean Lawyer, who's our general sales manager, she has the experience from, here now, but also New York City, Orlando, and has crafted a team that is very solid, that I don't even shepherd them. I'm just sort of like, hey, what about this? And I sort of let them do, because they're very good at what they do. So I don't need to get in the way.
You mentioned earlier UTR put a lot of people into national roles, and I know KTV's had their fair share as well. One thing that's unique about KTV is you've got a core group, you mentioned them, and you're one of them, that could have left, and they don't. They choose to stay here. You don't have to speak for them, but for you, I'm guessing you've had some opportunities to go to bigger markets.
Yeah.
What kept you here?
It's home. It's home. I think there was a significant age difference between my sisters and I. So, and both of them, when they graduated from high school and subsequently college, they moved away. And I was the last one here. And especially being as close to my father as I was, it was just the two of us for so long. I looked at having the opportunity that fell in my lap. Number one, made because back in the when I graduated in the mid 90s, broadcasting jobs were not plentiful, right? So you had to take, I remember a buddy of mine that graduated in December, and he wanted to do sports as every male at SU did. And there were two sports jobs available. One was in Pensacola, Florida, and the other was in Glendive, Montana. That was it. Two broadcasting sports jobs in the country. Mm-hmm. So when I have this one basically fall in my lap, I saw that as fate. And, and I had, over the 4 years, had made enough connections around here in the business. Certainly, fire department played a large role. I had made a whole crew of new friends there. And and home just meant a lot more than perhaps you realize as an 18-year-old kid. And I think when I went away to school, even though it was only an hour away, the neighborhood that I grew up in took very good care of my dad when I wasn't around. And I thought to me, that's what life is about, because my sisters, the younger of the two, who had moved to the Philadelphia area, she will tell you, she loves where she lives, but she may know one or two neighbors on the street. And yet here, the street I grew up on knew everybody, and they all took care of it. And the whole, honestly, quite honest, and the phrase, it takes a village, was never more, and they took care of me. Look, I was 14 when my mom passed, and everybody took care of me, took care of dad. And that just resonated with me, that I would much rather have that type of experience than, let me go to maybe I end up in, I don't know, I'm not going to New York City, but do I end up in St. Louis? Do I end up in, and look, there are days that I see folks I went to school with at SU that are doing very, very well. I'm like, I wonder what would have happened, but no regrets at all.
And then let's bring in your wife to the situation.
Already?
Yeah. Well, what do you mean already?
No, go ahead. I thought that was the grand finale.
Hopefully there's more than water in this.
I'm not going to go where you think. So you meet at WUTR.
Yep.
You have a relationship with each other.
Uh-huh.
And then Carrie has to come into this small knit community.
Yeah.
Not knowing anyone.
Right.
Carrie's a Western New Yorker for the audience.
Carrie is from a not small community, but not quite like Frankfort.
Yeah, Palmyra is Palmyra is probably about the size of Ilion, maybe, give or take. It's probably halfway between the sizes. So maybe 5,500 people, give or take.
So it's too funny. Does she equally appreciate Frankfort?
I think she does now.
Right.
That we've told you the story, so I might as well share it with your audience. Right before we got married, her lease was up in her apartment in Utica, so we actually bought the apartment over Joe Costanza's insurance. Probably the best apartment anybody could ever have, and certainly for newlyweds, it was outstanding. But so we get married, and at the time, I was still doing sports. She was working in sales by this point at UTR, so she was days, I was nights. We were legit ships passing in the night. The only time we got together was at like 4:00 in the afternoon at the break room. But there were times I would come home and our bags would be packed. And I'm like, what? Or her bags would be packed, right? And I'm like, what's the matter? And for her, it was a lot. Number one, other than the Vivacquas, there were not any redheads in town. She is redhead in Frankfort now. So she goes, I go to the Melrose. All these people are talking to me. They say, Mrs.
And then about you.
Mrs. McMurray, that's your mother. I don't know who these people are. And I'm like, I go, it all comes from a good place. But it's overwhelming because same thing, right? Like on the street that she grew up, she knew the neighbors in the neighborhood, and her father's on the school board, so they knew plenty of people, but it was just a different vibe.
Yep.
It was just a completely different vibe. And so, and then when they would start talking about, and your father-in-law and da-da-da. Yeah. And I mean, obviously she knew Dad very well at this point. We dated a couple years before we got married, but I don't think she realized, that's certainly not what she signed up for.
Right.
What did she sign up for?
I think she lost a bet is what happened, honestly, Sacco. But then, and so in all honesty, things work out. They do. So about a month before we got married in October of 99. So Labor Day of 99, I get a call from the ABC in Rochester. They had their weekend sports job open, and I had freelanced for them several times. I had done work for them. And so now, talk about putting the cart before the horse. I'm thinking, well, this job is mine. It's, they called me, talk about ego check. And so I go through the interview process, the whole 9 yards, right? I had set, basically like a preemptive strike to the guys in the fire department. Hey, it's been great. It's been a great 5-year run. So at that point, I guess it was 7 or 8 year run. But, it's home. It's Carrie's home. I gotta go. Didn't get the job.
Thank God.
Didn't get the job. And I'm like, wait, what? I'm like, but it was funny part about it was folks at UTR were more upset than I was, right? So how could they do that? And I'm like, as it turned out, they hired Tracy Bush was her name. And she stayed there for 8 years and she was fantastic. So they made the right call. But yeah, we were all set to go. And then probably a couple years later, we had bought the house by this point and we moved into the 500 block. Mm-hmm. And she just said, we're not going anywhere. She goes, this is home.
Yeah.
And I said, are you sure?
And if you meet Carrie for the first time today, right, the audience, you would think she's lived here her entire life. Yeah. Like Carrie has become a staple of this community probably just as much as you have.
Yeah.
Right. And
fair.
through your networking and she's in PR and kind of shoestring media, right? So it's funny because we didn't meet Carrie until we moved back home in 2006. Mm-hmm. And I had no idea she wasn't from here.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just thought she was just always from here. Let's get off the Carrie topic before I get myself into trouble. You mentioned the fire department a couple of times.
Yeah.
And we'll lump fire department, Frankfort Kiwanis. You do a ton for the community service. This goes back to your passion about the community and it being home. It's a lot of work, right? So what what pushes you to do as much as you do? Oh, by the way, while balancing all the work stuff, we talked about 3 different jobs that I was picking up, and the family and all the stuff you do with the community. So talk about why service is so important to you.
Well, a couple things. We were talking off camera before about idle hands of the devil's playground. I found that during school, and I'm talking high school, I got the best grades when I had the least amount of time. I played 3 sports. I was in the musical. I did student council, all that type of stuff. And I noticed that, especially in the later part of each school year, when you had musical practice and I had track practice, and then I've taken AP calculus. I didn't have enough time to breathe, but I did the best there because I didn't have time to. And this was before cell phones and the internet, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have time to mess around. And I think transferring over now, it keeps us going to not have a lot of idle time. The tough part about it is you mentioned those community organizations, they all seem to have things at the same time, right? Yeah. We can have a Tuesday night with nothing going on, but for example, tonight we're taping this, there's training at the firehouse, there's a Kiwanis meeting, and then Carrie and I are going out of town. So, and then, but then come Monday, I might not have anything to do. But for me, my dad had always said, you can either make the best of the community you have, sort of settle, or you can make the community the best it can be. And I think for me, an opportunity to serve the community. I mean, look, it's where we live, right? And you want to make it better. And and if there's some thing I can do to make it better, I'll do it. And look, that's how I joined the fire department. Ironically enough, I was a senior in high school, and they were looking for folks they'd offered a first aid CPR class, and they just needed bodies for the ambulance and lifting. I weren't doing any true hardcore medical stuff. And I'd never really thought of joining the department just because I was going away to school. And a lot of those same guys who I've mentioned are like, well, you're home all summer, you're home for a month. Just putting that commitment on during the breaks, we can't turn anybody away. Like we'll take any help we can get. And so I said, all right, you got me for 4 years. And then after that, we'll see. And now it's been 33. And Kiwanis was the same thing, right? Yeah. I mean, I'd grown up with, my father had been in Kiwanis, and I actually went to more events as a non-Kiwanian than I did when I first joined. And how I think it was Billy Evans. It was either Billy Evans, one of those guys. To get outstanding president, you had to have a +1 net gain in membership. Yeah. And my father, memorized all of it. I was home one Saturday from school, and it was going to be the last weekend of the Kiwanis year. Yeah. He's like, you need to join today so that this person can get a +1. I said, all right, again, you got me for 2 years after that. Yeah.
And now you're still a Kiwanian.
Yeah. So a couple of themes that are starting to emerge here. One of them is Stevie he's easily persuaded. He can be sold on some things and some ideas.
We've made some pretty good plans.
We've got Steve to do a few things through the years.
It seems like a good idea at the time.
I will always say that I said, as my friend Taco says, you only live once, Mac. You only live once. And I do have that ingrained in my head.
So best idea we ever had and persuaded him though for is definitely the Key West trip.
Oh, no question.
I mean, every year now.
I had never even thought of. I never even pondered Key West until we talked about it.
Never too funny. I'm glad we were able to persuade you to do that. We're still doing that every year.
Well, and I think yes, you persuaded me, but Redhead was in exactly with both feet, so I didn't really have a choice in it either.
Sorry,
no, you're good. For show notes and for audience, the legend of this here, right? So they can decipher what's going on. Steve is also not. He's Steve. He's Stevie. He's Mac. He's Macco. You'll hear me referred to as Sock or Sacco. My wife Kelly Plano, which is her maiden name, and Carrie is Care Bear or Redhead. Yeah. So we've got a lot of different names. Yeah. There's only 3 people at the table. Only 3 people at the table, but there's like 12 names we've mentioned.
But I think that's how you arrive in Frankfort, right? And Frankfort's full of nicknames, right? There are still people we don't know their real name.
And we gave Carrie Fanny McMurray. Steve and I were at a funeral.
Yes, we were.
Naturally.
Because where else would you have so much fun?
Yeah, laughing as we kneeled in a pew. and reading the obit and Fanny, so-and-so was mentioned. I look at Steve, I'm like, Fanny is a nickname. At Old Italian Frankfort, there's no more Fannies. They're all dying off. And so we came home, Carrie's like, hey, what's up, guy? Like, well, it was actually a really good funeral. You're now Fanny. You're Fanny Mac.
Yeah, and she's like, okay. Yeah. She goes, what's wrong with you idiots? I see you walking up the street, laughing hysterically. You just came back from a funeral. I go, well,
he had a good long life. Yeah. All right, let's make a hard turn into something that's probably not as much fun. So you mentioned the internet, you mentioned social media, you mentioned your love for this town. The WKTV social media is like, if you want to feel better about your life, go on there and start reading some of these comments.
Or it makes you question, like, there are people out there.
Who are these people?
Exactly.
Yeah.
How difficult, on a serious note, is it for you to read through that stuff? Because you put your heart and soul and you're proud of what you do, and you should be, and you've built an amazing, you've kept this brand going, improved it, frankly, through the years. How hard is it to read the crap that's on social?
Well, look, social media is a blessing and a curse for our business, right? We have been able to, it's a lot easier to find people, connect with people from a logistics standpoint, find out about stories that perhaps we're not cultivating on our own through our own sources or whatnot. That's the good part. The curse part is exactly what you're saying, is that there are so many keyboard warriors out there. Mm-hmm. And I'll be honest, so we have a digital content manager, his name is Zach Lewis, and Zach has the unenviable task of looking at a lot of those comments. And it's a struggle, because the easiest thing to do would just be, let's turn the comments off. Yeah. But then we get accused of, oh, you're biased.
Censorship.
You're censoring our free thought. And what we've realized over the years is that even if there's 200 comments on something, it's about 9 people, right? Yep. That are just
the same people
over and over
that
are
again.
Just, they, for whatever reason, they don't like their lot in life, so it's our fault. Mm-hmm. It's interesting, because in this business, there's a lot of parallels between media, politicians, law enforcement, right? Everybody can't wait to find fault. Everybody's got an opinion, but boy, if they need something, you got to help us. You know what I mean? And that's what is tougher about the younger folks coming up, like trying to explain, like, you've got to have thick skin to be in any of those aforementioned positions. Politician, I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. You got to have thick skin. Yeah. Law enforcement, you got to have thick skin. In our business, you got to have thick skin. But it's tough, right? Because what you say, I worked all day. We did all day to get this for you. And meanwhile, while you were likely sitting on your couch, you're gonna throw stones. So you have to take it with a grain of salt. It's not easy, but you sit there and you're like, and I've talked with you about this. It's not the keyboard warriors that bother you. It's the folks that
the personal stuff
But that's the cesspool of social media. Everybody wants to jump in on the bandwagon. Everybody can't wait to pile on for something. And the challenge is, and that's what I tell my folks, if we make a mistake, we have to correct it, because we're licensed by the FCC, right? I mean, you're playing with fire if you're going to mess around with that. Joe Public, I was Agnes Crabapple on Kossuth Ave. She can throw something out there and then just take it down. No harm, no foul. Right. And that's what, so you don't want to, I had a mentor one time say, don't get in a battle of smarts with those that aren't smart. And I don't want to paint that a broad brush that everybody that comments, that's right. Not true. But most of the negative comments, and look, I've been at your house when I've taken comments like folks that, ready to, and I will admit, when we make mistakes, we make them every single day. The difference is that thousands of people get to see us make our mistakes every day, and we have to own it. Because if we don't, and more often than not, when you do own it, those folks who are intelligent, understanding, they're like, okay.
They acknowledge it.
Like, okay, okay.
Yeah. It's the 80-20 rule. Yeah. You get 80% of your headaches from 20% of the people. Yep. Different version of what you said. I tell my team here all the time is don't argue with ignorance. Yep. Right? I mean, as soon as you smell something that's ignorant, just stop. Like, don't engage.
Yeah.
So but it is difficult. I see it third party watching you to scroll through that stuff and just see the nasty, and
it's the digital version of beer muscles is what it is, right? Keyboard warriors, right? They're and it's funny because I'll see people, some that I know, some that I don't, that will, they'll just take a shot at us, right? And a really, really vehement shot at us. And then I'll see them. They're like, hey, how's it going? I want to be like, are you out of your mind?
Kidding me right now?
You think I didn't see that?
And I've called a couple people on that, and they're like, well, yeah, but you can't be that way. I'm like, yeah, I can. I go, this place is like my, I have 3 kids, Jack, Audrey, and WKTV. Like, these are my people. So when you take a shot at any of them, you're taking a shot at me, and you're taking a shot at my kid. Oh, I never thought about it that way. I said, no, because there's no repercussion, right? Oh, I made my comment.
Yeah.
And it's not only keeping up with the Joneses, it's one-upping. Oh, this guy's going to say something this egregious. Oh, I'm going to go even further.
You want to be the most obnoxious person that's on the feed.
Exactly.
Well, I'm glad you brought up Jack because Jack is at Fisher and he is going into broadcasting as well.
Sports management. I think he likes what I do, but I don't think he wants to do what I do. He really wants to manage a team. He wants to be an agent, quite honestly.
Part of a team or
be an agent. Yeah.
What advice would you give students or people that want to go into broadcasting?
So I think the biggest one is that because the business has changed so much and some of it accelerated by COVID, quite honestly, is that it's not just broadcasting anymore. It's all about content creation, right? It's this, right? It's podcasting. It's everything, because even though the area skews older and we still have an enormous reach broadcasting wise, we have a bigger reach on our digital side, just because it can go all over the world, and it does. Now, bigger as far as land area, not as far as numbers yet, but it probably is close, honestly. Got 120,000 Facebook friends, and just millions of page views each month.
Well, and the on-demand part of it too.
Right.
The younger generation they can't turn on the 6 o'clock news.
Right. They want the news
instantly when they want it.
Right, and they want it shorter. Right. Yeah. The attention span is not a half hour or an hour. And we did market research about this that we just had completed, I don't know, about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And the challenge we now face is the challenge always is, and always in the business, is how do you get the younger folks interested, right? Because even when we were in our 20s, we never watched local. I did, but that was a geek. But then it'd be my career. But eventually the 20-somethings became 30-somethings, and they got married and they had kids, and all of a sudden, oh, wow, property taxes matter. So they became, you're not seeing that. And what we are seeing is that folks in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s are social media savvy and digitally savvy to an extent. So how do we retain what we have on the traditional legacy side, grow the digital social side, and not sacrifice either? Oh, by the way, with the same size staff. If I can figure that out, well, then I will go to that larger market and talk about. But no, but it changes every day, because what surprises me is what folks do consume. Right, there are younger folks that do watch the 6 o'clock news, and there are a lot of older folks that the reels we put up is how they get it. So it's a move. There's a moving target. The goalposts are moving, whatever euphemism you want to use. And that's what we struggle with. And that's our challenge going forward. Because quite honestly, the biggest competition that broadcasters face is not other broadcasters. It's apathy. Folks just don't want to sit and watch the news. Yeah. So how am I going to get the news? And then, oh, by the way, it's still a business. How do you monetize it? And we are finding ways to do that, because, we have millions of page views. That's a captive audience that any advertiser will want to be part of.
I keep trying to get you to retire.
You do, I know, and I keep trying to get you to pay for Audrey's college. So I guess we're both
no success yet, but I'm working on it. But you are, all kidding aside, right? In your 50s now, and that's you're at the second half of your career. Let's say,
yeah.
I'm trying to put you in the fourth quarter, but if the goal is to leave it better than you found it, set it up for future success. We're coming off an election that I was watching a national news and, just kind of seeing where the polls were, or the states as they were reporting. And someone came on and they said, well, 18 to 25, like nobody 18 to 25 watches the news, right? And so the big difference from when we were kids to now is there was no internet, there was no social media, right? So this is a thing, and there's talk that Joe Rogan, swang the election because this is where
the podcast,
where people are getting the. So I guess what do you see as the future of traditional media, right? What we know as traditional media, and where's it all going? Like, I mean, do you see a situation where WKTV is not all virtual, but like the news piece of it is the reels and meeting people where they are? TikTok, because the 18 to 25 today are going to become the 30 somethings that never watch the news. Yeah.
And there's no easy answer to that, honestly. And I sort of alluded to that earlier, because 18 to 25 year olds back in the day did become 30 somethings that because their lives changed once they settled down and needed to do that. Yeah. I mean, what we've become is content creators, and we just have to maximize whatever distribution level that's on where folks can consume it, which sounds very intense, but basically, you've got to be where they're at and where they can, but it's always going to be about the content, right? I think at the end of the day, folks are going to always go to us for, Netflix is never going to have a local news presence, right? If you want to find out what's going on in Herkimer County, in the Valley, in greater Utica area, Netflix, Hulu, that they won't be, that's not their brand. They don't need to. Right. So we will always fill that void. Weather is the biggest driver around here, hands down. And until those types of services can figure it out, one of our biggest things is having 3 meteorologists in the building, right? That can tell you, hey, this is where this snow is coming. This is where this tornado is. Whereas if you have somebody who is, in a cubicle in Houston that can't, they can track, certainly. The radar is radar, and that technology is that technology, but having that local flavor, that's what's going to keep both news, weather, sports. I always equate local sports at a boss of mine one time say local sports is neighborhood news, right? It's not, for sure. It's not hits, runs, and errors, right? Now, there are plenty of sites out there that do all the hits, runs, and errors that you want, and that's a niche that we didn't have many years ago. That has replaced, quite frankly, the role that the newspapers used to play. But for us, it's all about video. It's all about local. And I think we'll always have that. Will it be 5 and 6 and 10 and 11 and in the morning? I don't know. I know the business has changed more in the past 2 years than it did in the previous 20, but I don't see it ever being in a position where it would go away. And like I said, anecdotally, but there are younger folks that, I saw you filling in the morning. Now, I haven't filled in the morning. I mean, I have to after Thanksgiving, but I haven't filled in the morning in a month and a half. Like, I saw you the other day. So they're experimenting, and I think what we have to do as a business is have the platforms complement and supplement each other. Okay, so we can. And I won't mention names, but I will get accosted by some of the older folks in Frankfort. Why do you always say go to WKTV.com? I want to see it there. It's like, because I can't tell you a 40-minute story in the 2-minute that I have, but I can on the website, right? So you have one tease the other and then tease it back, right? So then when you're on the website, say, well, okay, here's what we have, and coming up tonight at 6, and you just keep and building that sequence and keeping that sequence going is how it's going to survive. It's not easy, and you've got to be able to pivot, right? We've been around 75 years, but not by doing the same thing we've always done. You've got to change. And honestly, getting the viewers to buy it and from, talking about monetization, the viewers and advertisers to get into that mindset. Like, we have some, self-promote. We have some very good, fantastic digital platforms. And one of the things our sales folks get on the street is, but if I'm going to buy KTV, I want to buy the 5 o'clock news. Okay. But we're not just the 5 and 6 o'clock news. And so but that's how they resonate, and that's where they want to be, because it's still the bread and butter.
It's an ego thing too. Yeah. I think for a lot of advertisers is when I first started, that was a big deal for me, right? Like I would run TV spots and people are like, oh, you must be doing really well. I saw you on TV, and it's similar to, well, I see you on the 6 o'clock news, Steve, like you must be a multimillionaire, right?
Right. Yeah. Close.
Back to the kids though, too, that we were talking about a minute ago, and the snow day predict, like you guys are the go-to website for that. A lot of times, like I know these schools have the robocall that goes out and some people don't get them.
Yeah.
If you want to know if you're having a snow day, you go to WKTV closings and the kids are on there.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Do you have like a title sponsor for snow days?
We do.
Well, I'm telling you right now.
That's a big opportunity.
That is huge.
Listen, and that's one of the first things they do. Is they know where that, because, and again, we used to call it, showing my age, we used to call it DVR proof, right? That's why live sports, that's why networks pay billions for live sports, because it's DVR proof, right? So now we have to be something that is streaming proof, right? You can't go to Netflix or
TikTok
to find out, you know what I mean? And now there will be times I can, as technology evolves, that they will have some sort of local flair. Maybe, but it's got to make sense for them financially.
Well, and the other thing is like TikTok, Scott makes fun of me and he says TikTok is corrupting our country.
China,
who owns TikTok. But like, would I go on TikTok for purely entertainment?
Yeah.
Entertainment purposes. I don't believe anything that I see on TikTok as far as being relevant. But if I go to WKTV's website, it's the news. Like you guys have that.
Yeah.
You have that. And TikTok doesn't have that. And even Facebook doesn't. Like, you can't get your news from any other place, I don't think.
Fake news.
It's all fake news. You're right. You're right. He makes fun of me.
Except us. Except
KTV.
And that's what I was saying earlier. But, we're licensed by the FCC.
Exactly.
Right? Like there are certain parameters that we have to hit and guidelines that we have to follow, or we're no longer in business. Whereas that's one of the things with social media
and content creators, that they don't do that.
Right. And there's they don't.
The other thing too is, how many employees at KTV?
I think 42.
Yeah. So this is a monstrous production, right? And I think the people online, and frankly, what we struggle with here with our little podcast is capacity. Like there's only so many places you can be. There's only so many things you can talk about. Only so many people you can talk to, right?
Right.
And so you have 42 people on staff that I click my remote and boom, you're there. Like it's magic for me, but these are actual humans that you're managing at 3 a.m. and during storms and vacations. And, it's a huge production to do what you do. And I think, we lose sight of that sometimes with, anyone can throw a post on social
for 2 seconds. Well, yeah, listen, again, my father, number one fan, once I figured out where I worked, so what do you do all day? Right? Like, is there, Joe Public figured, especially when I was anchoring the 5 and 6, like, what do you get there, about 10 to 5? I go, well, no, actually, I've been there all day.
All you do is read the teleprompter.
Yeah, I mean, get there 10 to 5, you leave it. I wish. If I had a gig like that, I'd have a lot more hair. Yeah. But yeah, it was, but yeah, I think it's just folks not knowing. It's the unknown, and what social media has done, it like qualifies their assumptions, right? Well, I know this has to be true. Well, okay.
Yeah, it's interesting, and we'll get out of this rabbit hole with social media, but everybody now is the media.
Yeah.
Right, wrong, or indifferent. Like I can go on and post whatever the hell I want right now, as long as it meets Facebook standards.
Yeah.
But whatever I want, and people will read it and they'll assume it's true. It could be total BS.
Don't ever assume anything Scott says is true.
Well, that I learned a lot. When did you come up?
I love you. I love
you. Is that to me?
That be true.
Is that to me or to her?
Both of you.
Okay, perfect. No, that's what I meant about the blessing and the curse, though, right? Because our television market, the way it's drawn by Nielsen and the FCC is, we go from Old Forge, actually north of Old Forge, to Oneonta, right? That's 2 hours and change, about 2.5 hours as the crow flies. And so we can't get to every area. So social media has helped us, whether it's, spot news, fires, whatever, or public meetings. I mean, we're able to zoom into meetings now for especially the southern portion of our market, the Oneontas, Cooperstown, that we weren't able to do. And that's why I said everything had been escalated by COVID, and people are okay to accept it. When I first started, well, the internet wasn't really around. But to take video from someone that wasn't employed at your station was blasphemy.
Yeah.
Like you didn't do it. And then you fast forward to 10 or 20 years and you start doing Skype interviews and, the quality wasn't good. And so if you had a Skype interview on the air, it was, oh my God, how Bush League is this? Now, and in COVID, when that was all you could do, now people are like, I don't care.
You'll see Lester Holt doing it now.
Just give me the news.
Just give me the news. I don't care what it looks like. And so that has changed, but that has opened up some opportunities for us. And that's that blessing part of social media is that it's increased our reach. And I would love to have that more of a 50-50 blessing versus curse than it currently is.
The other thing too, go easy on our boy Bill Cardis, because as you talk about north of Old Forge down to Oneonta and, over to Sprakers or wherever, it's like it could be 12 inches of snow in Rome and completely sunny in Oneonta. And so to do the weather around here, it's the valley, right? Because there's mountains and everything's different.
No, so. And that's it. And folks, the irony or hypocrisy of social media that it's worldwide, but it makes people's perspective that much smaller, right? It didn't snow on my street, so Bill's wrong. Well, that's not really how it works.
Nicest dude in the world, by the way.
He is fantastic. He comes into the schools, which is awesome. I mean.
And I think what happens is if you were to actually research it and go line by line, those guys are, it's like referees, right? Yeah, refs make mistakes, but 90% of the calls they make are spot on. And it's the same thing with the weather folks. You just remember, and Bill, now Bill, Eric, and James, they'll own it, right? If they make a mistake, you got to own it.
Yeah, it makes it real.
Right?
Well, it's a prediction. People don't realize that you're predicting the weather. It's not right. You take the information you have and you make the best
shoot
prediction.
to make these interviews about 30 minutes. I think we're on an hour.
Poor Jay. Jay's like, where am I going to cut this?
Our producer, Jay Spina, is like, I'm going to let him keep talking, but the camera died about 20 minutes ago.
Surprised he's not pointing at his watch.
29 minutes.
All right, so let's
this won't take us 29 minutes.
Well, what's funny is we always end with 5 rapid fire questions, and I was trying to do it this morning, and I told Kelly, I said, she goes, "You have more than 5 questions."
I got in the car. I go, "What is this?"
I couldn't narrow it down, and we try to have fun with these, but with you, I'm like, I don't want to get Stevie fired, So I mean,
then I will be one step closer to retirement, which is your ultimate goal, apparently.
My master plan coming together.
Well, so I'll start with an easy one. I'll start with the first one that's not controversial. Have you ever cried or almost cried on air?
Yes. When I left the anchor desk with Kristen, she started crying. So, and work
wife.
Yeah, my work wife, Krista Copeland. And, we were partners for so long. Yeah. And, she said she wasn't going to cry. And I started to well up a little bit. It was easy because I wasn't leaving. Right. But I know, and she was very happy for me personally that I was promoted to the GM, and I was obviously happy for my. But I will tell her to this day, the biggest downside of taking the VP GM role was not being able to sit next to her every day, because we did. I mean, we were a team, and so that starts going on in your head. And so, yes, definitely started welling up, but not bawling, because I knew I was going to be there. And then if I started crying, then she would have really been upset. And you guys
still collaborate. You do the Boilermaker. Oh, yeah. And you do special events together.
I look forward to seeing you and Stevie at the end of the Boilermaker.
I got to find the picture. We'll see if we can get it in the attached to this segment. We did a watch party for Steve's last night on the 6 o'clock news. It was a big deal. We did a watch party, which, if you know us, involved a couple of drinks. And my brother-in-law and I picked up Carrie, and we held her in front of the TV as Steve was saying goodbye, and we're with drinks and taking pictures. So we got to find that.
Yeah, we do have to find that. I have that picture.
I remember that.
This is probably like picking your favorite kid, which actually probably isn't too hard for you. But sorry, Audrey. I know you're not listening. What's the most memorable story you've ever covered?
I thought you might ask that. I was trying to think. They're all memorable. It's hard to pick one most memorable. I think back about we cover a lot of tragedy, unfortunately, and I think about the Valley shooting spree a lot. That was just a day of 100% adrenaline, and where I was probably the most proud of the team, because they just jumped into action and did what needed to be done. And it wasn't until after that we took a breath and we're like, wow. Yeah. So there's that. 9/11, obviously. 9/11, aside from the obvious reasons, I was a news director at UTR then. And, I was the oldest one on staff, and I was, 28, 29, so I had and I remember a staffer who was maybe, 23, 24 years old, just in absolute tears because he couldn't fathom what was going on. Not that I could either.
Right.
But there's that. But on a positive one, and this is really going deep into the archives, I remember when there was a BRAC hearing, and the rumor is that Rome Lab was going to be shuttered, and they were going to take all the military installations at Griffiths, like they had shut the base down in 93. So this was probably 2002, 2003, if I'm doing the math right. And I remember when they read that not only was Rome Lab going to be spared, but some jobs were actually coming out here to DFAS and the lab. And I remember Vic Vetters was the GM at the time, and I just remember him like putting his hands in the air. Like it was great to get a win.
Yeah.
Right. Because we had been kicked in the teeth so many times. And I can just remember anchoring both at UTR and at KTV, and just this, this place is leaving, 500 layoffs. This place is closing, 400 layoffs. And we're not immune to that. Remington's right down the road, and we still go through that. But I think that BRAC hearing that we finally got a win was one that I'll certainly never forget.
If you could interview anyone, past, present, who would it be?
You know what, boy, I don't know. I mean, I'd love to chat with Mike Tomlin from the Steelers, just because he's such a wordsmith right off the get go. But he's also he's very intimidating, and
I feel like we could make that happen.
I don't think he's not a huge fan of the media. I think he understands that. I think that he understands that in the NFL, the media is like a necessary evil. But I'd like to. He just seems to have like I said, he's a wordsmith, and there's these Tomlinisms, and he just comes up with them so easily. I think that off the get go, I think that's one that I'd like to have.
All right, super simple one here: Utica greens or tomato pie?
Honestly, it depends on which ones you're talking. The best greens I ever had were Thurston's, so they're not around anymore. I would have to say tomato pie.
It's hysterical that everyone's trying to do a Thurston's pizza.
Yep.
Everyone talks about the Thurston's greens, and yet Thurston sits empty.
Well, maybe when I get fired and we retire, we'll buy Thurston's and fire that up again. Let that rumor start.
All right, last one. Okay. One word you want to be remembered by.
2. And it's sort of when I talked about Bill Worden earlier. I just want to be remembered as a good guy.
I think you're a good guy, Stevie.
Well, thank you, Kelly.
Think you're doing it, Steve McMurray.
Thanks, Sacco. Appreciate
for joining us, man.
Yeah, no, this was fantastic.
We're out of bandwidth. Our production crew left.
Jay's like, there's no way I can edit it. And we're not going to start the process of having part 2 and part 3. No.
Feel free to start bashing us on social media.
Exactly. I'm sure they will.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Love Living Local. As you know, we do not run ads. Our only mission is to shine a spotlight on amazing people doing amazing things here in our local community. If you'd like to support us with this mission, we have 3 ways you can help. You can share our content on social, subscribe or follow the show on your favorite podcast platform, and you can visit our lovelivinglocal315.com website to stay up to date with everything happening in Central New York.